How have you been? I hope you've been well. Okay, so today I have Panera bread, and a lot of things went wrong before this video started, so this sandwich I thought was going to be like, easy, not very messy, but they smothered it in green goddess sauce. And I tried it a bit, so that's why you see like a little bite mark here. So I do know how it tastes. But the nature of this video was to go over books, so periodically you're gonna see me wipe my hands or grab one of the books. And I'm kinda on a time crunch. So yeah. So I have a Green Goddess Club chicken sandwich, and then I have some mac and cheese. I'm not gonna lie, this mac and cheese kind of scared me at first because it wasn't made with cheddar, but it's still good. It can still very well be white cheddar, so there's that. So let me get a bite in before we start the story time. It's good. It is good. Already had it before, but it's still good. Okay. So as you guys know, I love to read, and when I show you how many books I've read this year, you're probably going to be like, well, you look like you didn't read that many books, which is true compared to other people who read, but this winter I didn't read as much because I was dealing with some family issues. And because seasonal depresso is very real. Also, there will be spoilers. Ooh, I got something stuck in my teeth. There will be spoilers. If you see the cover of the book and you recognize it, I give like a brief pause so you can skip forward or just skip back or just leave the video entirely. That's okay. Because I know spoilers have kind of ruined it. Some books for me. So yeah. But anyway, gotta get into the first book I've read this year. This is Asomo Desai's No Longer Human. This book is very, very interesting. It's about this pre-World War or post-World War. Post-World War life. And the author kind of self-inserts himself into this book. Although he says this is a memoir of a notebook, but I kind of find it hard to believe based on how he talks throughout the book. But you follow this person whose name is Obayozo, and basically he grew up in a very well family, circumstances of how he perceived the world ended up to lead him down a very, very dark rabbit hole. This is very much a character dissension story. For those who don't know what a character dissension story is, this is probably a very poor example, but think about the Joker movie that came out. He starts off as just a guy who needs help, but over time he kind of slowly descends into this manic, this insanity that leads him to become the Joker. So that's what a character dissension story is. I rated this 4 stars. I personally like it. Once again, this is a very tough read. It goes over a lot of trigger warnings that most people are not okay with. So yeah. But seriously, if you have the opportunity, I would say definitely give this a shot if some of the trigger warnings in this book don't bother you. So it's not that big, you know, probably about 180 pages. And ironically, this is the book that took me the longest to get through. But after a reading slump, it takes me longer and longer to get back to the pace of what I'm used to reading at. So, you know, I think this book took me about 3 weeks to get through, but it should really realistically take you 3 or 4 days of reading, you know, decently to get through it. I had a napkin and I lost it. I'm sad. But yeah, it took me about 3 weeks to get through it. Mainly just reading on the train. I didn't really read it at work because it is kind of a heavy book. And just really those 2 places. The only time I read it home was when I was close to finishing it. So yeah. Also, the interesting thing about this book is that this is a translated version. The original manuscript and copy is in Japanese. So the person who, you know, published it, reread it. But as you can see, the margins and the space at the bottom and corners of the book are really high. So getting through this should be very quick, you know. So that's a song with a size No Longer Human. That mac and cheese is surprisingly good. was bound to happen. Some Stephen King and some misery. This book is very, very interesting, and this book actually showed me how talented of a writer Stephen King is. He, for the majority of the story, there are a total of only 2 characters in one room. I mean, of course they move throughout the house, but it's genuinely one setting. The antagonist is a woman named Annie Wilkes, and she is terrifying. I genuinely didn't think Stephen King had the ability to make an old woman terrifying, but she is genuinely terrifying. For me, what terrified me the most about her was that it wasn't necessarily her weird language that some people say. It's their justification for doing like very messed up things. Like, there'll be times, and this is a true spoiler, so if you don't want to know, please fast forward or click off. But there was one time she straight up like abused him over something that she did, but accused him of doing it because it was his fault. And I found it genuinely like disgusting, because that is just straight up gaslighting, you know? Absolutely love the cover, by the way. It's about a 350-page book. This was the book right after I read No Longer Human. And in a weird, like twisted sort of way, I did read this book at work. Maybe because I knew that it was fiction, you know? But with a somewhat the size book, it made me feel as though he was speaking from experience. Like, this wasn't the fiction book that he was leading it to be. And I checked the book, and it doesn't say like this is a novel. He just kind of says this is a collection of notebooks, and that kind of worries me. But anyway. I got a special little drink for myself. Baja Blast, baby. I don't know how I messed up the last when I said that, but oh well. I'm gonna open this up. Cheers. So good. Okay. On to the next book. This is my first book by this author, and it kind of shows me how different writing styles go. I read Neil Gaiman's The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and this book, first off, this book is beautiful. It's like abstract art, very clean, you know, not a lot of, it's just simple. And this book, okay, I want to say that I liked it. I did like the book. I gave Misery 4.5 stars, and I gave Neil Gaiman's, I gave this a 4, like a 4.25. Sorry. But what gets me with this book is how fast paced it is compared to a Stephen King book. This book, it felt like every single word was intentional and required action. Like, sorry, one sec. Like with Stephen King, you know, Stephen King likes to yap sometimes. And sometimes, you know, that means you can kind of read a bit faster. Like, oh, okay, you know, this is important because it's Stephen King, but I can kind of let up a bit. But Neil Gaiman's, and this is my only book by him, so maybe it changes in other longer books that he has, but with Neil Gaiman, it felt like I couldn't let up. Like, I couldn't take my foot off the gas, and it was different. I'm not saying it was bad, I'm just saying it was different. And with this book in particular, it felt a bit more open. So the entire book is predominantly like a flashback. And weirdly, I didn't check the genre this book was in before I read it. But I did read the back and it said, like, this is a guy who, he's here in town for a funeral. He visits this woman at this old farm in his childhood. I thought it was just going to be more like a literary fiction or just a fiction book, but things started to happen throughout the book and I'm like, this sounds more fantasy-esque, and it is a fantasy book. And that's entirely my fault. But all in all, good book. This book is second to last. This next book. And you've already seen this author, you know, so far in this video. Take a sip. You've already seen this author's again. And it is Osamu Dazai again. This is Flowers of Buffoonery. And I can't actually show the back of this book because it deals with a very, very serious topic. So this is going to be spoiling both this book and No Longer Human because this event happens in this book. And essentially, the protagonist in No Longer Human, he aids a woman in committing unaliving herself. There's that, you know, the S word that people use that, you know, is censored now, so I'm not gonna say it, but they both hold hands and try to drown themselves in the sea, but the woman doesn't survive, but he does. In this book is a memoir of when he was in the hospital. Once again, the author, I do feel like he self-inserts, but I don't think this is his account this time. And if this isn't his account, then we can safely say that No Longer Human's account is also just fiction. We can also see it as fiction. But this book was weird because, and I gave this 3 stars, because the author, when he does self-insert, he's almost bringing down his own work. There are many times in this book where he just kind of says, oh, this book I'm writing is terrible, why am I even continuing? Like multiple times, instead of just going on with the story. And for that reason, it's just kind of like, why am I reading this if the author doesn't have faith in himself? Like, we all make books, well, not all of us, but when authors make books, there's a certain type of confidence and vulnerability you have in bringing yourself out there. But for some reason with Osamu Dazai, he kept bringing down his work. However, he is a pioneer in doing this, in the sense that people now respect his work on him being critical of his work. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. I'm just gonna finish my mac and cheese. And there technically is one more book that I've read. Let me get it real quick. All of you knew what this book was because I put it in my Instagram post a while ago. This is It by Stephen King, and this is a chunky boy. You can even see where I'm at. The first one is where I'm at, and the second one is where I want to be by the end of the week. This book so far has been a roller coaster of emotions. The first thing that stands out to me is that this is 1980. They use certain phrases that are not acceptable in today's society. Definitely not acceptable. But back in the 80s, you could say it and nobody would bat an eye. But you also have to remember that this is New England during the 1850s. 1950s through 80s. And this book is good. The way they did the movie, I believe, was superb. The way they made it into the 2 parts, because in this book, in this novel, this book, they go back and forth between what happened June of 1958 when they were kids with the clown Pennywise, and what happens now in the 80s when they're adults and they're trying to come back and fight against Pennywise. Yeah, the fact that they split it up into one being childhood and the other being adults, perfect. Absolutely brilliant, because there is no way you're gonna make the back and forth seem good if you did it all in one movie. Kind of like in Dune. Dune had 2 parts because the story is just so large and massive that you, as the reader, you can't get that all in one movie. I think the person who originally made Dune said that the movie was supposed to be like 10 hours long in order to fully encompass all of the story, but the movie, the studio company, they didn't believe in it. They didn't believe in giving him even a 3-hour movie. David Lynch with like 2 hours and 30 minutes of film had to do the entire movie of Dune in one sitting, and that's just not feasible with a story that big. Imagine if like Way of Kings by, Brandon Sanderson was made in like 90 minutes. That would be an awful movie. So, yeah, I was yapping for a little bit too long, stuttering over my words. I've been yapping for a bit long, so I'm gonna cut it off here. Hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you liked the eating sounds. I hope you liked the the review of the books I did. So far with it, it's at a 5-star read right now. Like, this is 1,000 pages and I'm making very, very good progress so far. So I hope you all enjoy, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.